Okay, today we're talking about factoring with a leading coefficient. So up to now, we have not had a leading coefficient. And if you're wondering what that means, recently we've had stuff like x squared plus bx minus c, or something with the plus and minuses here. But there's no constant next to this x squared. Today we're going to be looking at things that do have some kind of ax squared plus or minus bx plus or minus c, okay? So we're going to be focusing on things that have this there. For instance, our first problem will be something with 2x squared plus 7x minus 9. But let's go ahead and I'm going to type up the steps to do this problem. Go ahead and write them down, and then we'll use those steps to work this problem right here. So our steps, see. There it is. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is to multiply the first and last coefficient. Maybe I can spell coefficient right and not spell coffee. Step 2, you're going to find the factors of whatever that product is. And while you're doing that, find the sum of the middle term. Factors of that middle product that sum to the middle term. We're going to replace the middle number or term with those two factors. And then we're going to do everybody's favorite, factor by grouping. That's why we went ahead and did that first, so that you know how to do it when we get to this part, okay? So those are my 5 steps. I'm going to come over here and work my problem. 2x squared plus 7x minus 9. So my first thing I need to do is multiply the first and last coefficient. So 2 times negative 9 would give me negative 18. And I want factors of that. Factors of negative 18 that sum to 7. Well, looking at this and what I already have up here, I'm thinking that negative 9 and 2 might work, what I have in the problem, but that gives me negative 7. So maybe I need to switch my signs up and do 9 and negative 2. That gives me positive 7. So I listed factors and I found the sum of the middle term to be 7. We're good. So now I'm going to go ahead and replace the middle term, that 7x, with these factors I found. So I'll have 2x squared plus 9x minus 2x minus 9. Okay, or if you wrote it the other way, 2x squared minus 2x plus 9x minus 9, that's fine, because it'll work either way. And then I'm going to do factor by grouping, which means, remember, we're going to split it down the middle. Out of these two things, all I can take out is an x. And so I'll have 2x plus 9. Out of these two terms, they're both negative, so I can take out a negative 1, and I'll have 2x plus 9. Factor by grouping says I take one of my repeated terms and write it. And my other factor is composed of those things that were left out in front, so the x and the minus 1. And this would be my final answer. That's a lot more steps now that it has a leading coefficient. I'm going to be doing a little bit more work, and I'm going to combine the factor chart that I did with just factoring without a leading coefficient, and I'm combining that with factor by grouping to get one solid good answer. Now, how do I know if this answer is correct? Well, I can always check it by FOIL. Let's go ahead and do another example. So I have 5a squared minus AB minus 22 b squared. Just because I have this b squared in the second part doesn't mean I, one, get to freak out, two, it's not gonna work any differently. Now, my other question is, what is the constant in front of AB? Well, there's nothing written here, just a negative sign. So that would be a negative like 1, that understood 1, okay? So my first step to solving this is to multiply the first and last coefficient. So I need to know what negative 22 times 5 is. And that would actually be negative 110. So I'm going to set up my chart. I want factors of negative 110 that sum to negative 1, because that's this term. This is going to be a little bit harder because you're not used to factoring 110 all the way. But I obviously have 22 and 5. That's not going to help me very much. But what about we know it ends in a 0, so we know it's divisible by 10. So what about trying negative 10 and 11? Well, that would give me a positive 1. So we can try the other side of that, which would be negative 11 and positive 10, and that gives me that negative 1. So once we've done that, I take these factors that I got, and I plug them into that middle term. And I'm going to rewrite it. So I should have 5a squared minus 11ab plus 10ab minus 22b squared. So all these other terms drop down, like the 5a squared and the minus 22b squared. This term just gets replaced with this, okay? Then I go ahead and do factor by grouping, meaning I split this in half, and I look at each half and I see what I can take out. Out of this first one, I can take an a. So that'll go on the outside of the parentheses. 5a squared divided by a would just be 5a. If I divide minus 11ab by a, I'm going to get minus 11b. Okay? Over here, I see that both of these are even, so I can take out a 2, and I can take out a b. So out of this first one, if I divide 10ab divided by 2a, I would be left with 5a. And if I divide negative 22b squared by 2b, I would be left with minus 11b. So I get that repeated term. I take one of those repeated terms and I bring it down. So I have 5a minus 11b. And then my other term that I get to take is what was outside of the parentheses. So a plus 2b. And that is my final answer. Okay? I'm going to let you work this next one on your own. And this next one will be 2b squared plus 13b minus 24. So make sure you are setting up your table. That is part of the work you are needing to show for these problems. Okay? So when I multiply 2 and negative 24 together, I get factors of negative 48 that sum to 13. I myself did not know what would work here, so I tried the usual ones like negative 2 and 24, but that gave me 22. And it didn't really help if I tried it the other way, because that just gave me negative 22. Negative 6 and 8 gave me 2. Again, if I try it the other way, it did not help. That was not the other way. There's the other way, negative 2. So I'm running out of factors that I know off the top of my head. And that's okay. You may need to experiment a little bit. What ends up working is negative 3 and 16 will give me that 13. Okay, so this is the one I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and replace it, or replace 13b with these two factors. So I'll have 2b squared minus 3b plus 16b minus 24. And then I go into factor by grouping. So I split it down the middle. I say out of these two terms, the only thing they could possibly have in common is a b. So I'm going to divide that out by putting it on the outside. And I'll be left with 2b minus 3 plus, over here, the only thing, I think they're both divisible by 2, maybe? No? 8? 8. They're both divisible by 8. There we go. So if I take that 8 out, 16b divided by 8 would leave me with 2b. 24 divided by 8 would be negative 24 would be minus 3. So I need to take one repeated factor and bring it down for my answer. Again, doesn't matter which repeated factor. And then my other factor that I'm going to bring to the party is the ones that were on the outside the parenthesis, so b plus 8. And that, ladies and gentlemen, should have been your answer. Just for giggles and grins, we'll do one last one. 5y squared minus 17y plus 6. Make sure you're setting up your factor table. So I'm looking for factors of positive 30 that give me a negative 17. That means both of them are going to be negative. When I do this, I know that negative 2 and negative 15 will work. And I'm going to use those to replace this 17y with. So I will have 5y squared minus, I'm going to change the order here a little bit. Instead of taking that 2y first, I'm going to take the 15y. And it really does not matter. I just thought it would be a little easier for factor by grouping. Okay. I divide it down the middle. From these two pieces, I can take a 5, and I see they both have a y, so I'm going to take a y out. And this one, all I'm left with is y. This one, I'm left with 3. Over here, and note this is a minus 2y. I kind of drew my line through it, but it is still a minus. I can take out a 2, and then I would have y, or negative y plus 3. What if I do if these don't match? Well, I can try, and instead of just taking out a positive 2, what if I took out that negative 2? Instead, if I take out a negative 2, I'm left with a positive y, and 6 divided by negative 2 would be that negative 3. So now they match, and it's the same term. So I bring one of them down, y minus 3, and then remember my other term I get to bring is the one that was outside the parentheses, which in this case is 5y minus 2. Thanks for watching.